Look back on my career, and so many of us, I think it's almost a universal challenge as we transition out of the service. And those of us who served longer, I think have it harder, but all of us have some level of challenge and transition. And you bring up leadership, and there are so many different elements of leadership, and leading yourself, right? Leading your opportunities, and not to mention the typically most of us end up in spots and jobs where we're a leader or a manager in some form or another, formally or informally at the organizations that we're at. And there's a level of expectation coming out as a veteran that we are going to assume some leadership role, that we're going to bring some level of leadership. My experience is that there's a good side and a bad side to that. Depending on the organization that you go to, the expectation of your leadership may be negative.
Hey, welcome to this episode of the show. Today's guest is retired Marine Colonel Scott Jensen, a combat veteran, former HQMC Behavioral Programs Chief, and the CEO of the National Veteran Small Business Coalition. Welcome to the show, sir. Good to see you here.
Thanks, Danny. It's great to be here with you. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. Well, I gave a brief introduction. Curious to learn about your story from you. Maybe you want to add something to it or expand it a little bit.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, you did a great summary of kind of who I am and where I am. I was a nearly 30-year Marine veteran, as you highlighted. Spent all my time when I was in the operating forces as a helicopter pilot, and then a lot of time in the behavioral programs, manpower reserve affairs type work. That was quite a while ago at this point. I got out in 2016, and it was the results really of working in the behavioral side of things at the end of my Marine Corps career that pushed me towards a desire to continue to work with veterans. I'm a Marine. I'll always be a Marine, and I love other Marines. So if that lets me hang out with other Marines, but really any one of our veterans and our military family members, that's my community, my tribe, and that's who I like to spend time with. And so that brought me into the nonprofit space, supporting what ultimately here over the last several years now has been supporting veteran serving organizations, and not just professionally and in my work environment, but also on my free time and when I'm engaging with volunteer work as well.
So can you tell me more about your nonprofit and your company? How exactly you guys help veterans? What programs you have? I'm just curious to learn more.
Yeah, the National Veteran Small Business Coalition is an organization that focuses on supporting veteran-owned small business entrepreneurs who are interested or are currently doing work in federal contracting with the federal government. And we focus in three areas as part of our work. One is in training. We provide extensive national level training across multiple programs in multiple locations, but also we have a very robust virtual program as well to support those that we work with. So training across really a broad spectrum of getting started all the way through growing and being successful as a company, and ultimately even addressing how to exit, how to sell your company, value the company, and retire gracefully. So a lot of different programs and resources that we provide, national conferences, academies where we're speaking in local areas. We have a financial symposium each year where we address the challenges of getting fiscal and financial resources needed to do the work that they do. And then we also have an awards section where we recognize large primes, federal agencies, and small businesses and their leaders that are doing good work as well. One big thing for anybody interested in us, we have a YouTube channel with hundreds of hours of content that's free to anybody who wants to use it. We also have a consulting program where anybody free can dial in, go to our website, schedule an appointment with our consulting team, and they have access and resources to hundreds of national level subject matter experts that can help in any area that someone might need help in as they're addressing their small business, or how to do procurement with the federal government. So that's training. The other thing we're really well known for is our engagement. putting the right people in the right rooms to find the right partners, the right opportunities to make a dollar, make the next contracting dollar and be successful. And then the third area that we've really established ourselves in is our advocacy work. We've got close ties and good connections to the federal agencies that do work with small businesses, with Congress and others, and we enjoy a very good relationship when it comes to representing veteran-owned businesses, the needs of veteran-owned businesses, and to partner with congressional and federal leaders on policies and influencing policies that are best served to support veteran-owned businesses. So training, networking, and advocacy are kind of our three things that we focus on.
And over the years working with veterans, what are the biggest challenges that you see when it comes to running the business that veterans face? Maybe you have noticed some patterns or something that you know people some mistakes that they make as they try to start their own business.
Yeah, that's a great question. Not only based on our observations, but also based on research. We have a close relationship with the Institute for Veteran and Military Families up at Syracuse University, who's done extensive research and data collection from small businesses. So from those businesses themselves, what they're telling us also reinforces what we observe. And two things really stand out is one, the financial side of things, understanding and gaining access to the finances they need to start and manage a company. Part of that is truthfully, even just literacy, financial literacy and understanding business finances and what those words mean. As veterans, they don't spend a lot of time teaching us about business finance, so we're not really given that foundation as veterans. So there's a shortfall. And oftentimes I see mistakes made in that veterans feel like they have to pay for things themselves. They have to mortgage their future in order to start a company. What do I mean by that? They're touching their retirement, which is a big no-no, or they're mortgaging their houses and things like that. And sometimes, you need to provide collateral, to get things started. But being able to understand even the terminology, how to get access to money, where the opportunities are, the risks that you're going to have to take financially, and what risks are good risks versus what risks are bad risks. An old mentor used to tell me, you can borrow for anything, a car, a house, a refrigerator, education, but you can't borrow for retirement. So never use your retirement as a tool, So I said, that's one of the things that I really harp on. So that's one thing. Finances, are a real a challenge. The other thing that is a real challenge, which is one of the reasons we exist, is access to people who've been there and done that. The knowledge base of how to do business, how to be an entrepreneur, how to set the business up, how to get started, how to be ready to do that work. That's a challenge. And that's what we observe as well as what we see and are told by small businesses that are trying to get started. And then the third thing is access to the right people and the ability to get access once you are established. How do I get a contract? Who do I talk to? How do I get involved with the people who can award contracts? How do I make a dollar, right? Those three areas, finances and knowledge and access to people who are smart and can help get you started and help you build your company, and then access to the people who have the dollars for the contracts are the three areas. And those are the things we try to focus on pretty extensively in the work that we do.
Mm-hmm. And how can people get in touch with you guys? I can put a link to your website or to the YouTube channel. Any other resources that they can use?
The place I would start is our website. We're actually excited. We're rolling out a new website here in the next couple of weeks, but it'll all be the same link. But it's www.nvsbc.org. Pretty easy to get to. From there, there's tabs at the top, resources. That's where you can get to our YouTube channel. And that's where you can get to our consulting programs that are all free. You can get to our events. We host regional events across the countries in different populations of contracting locations, as well as in the Washington, D.C. area. But you can access all of that through our website. And the tabs at the top.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll make sure that the link are in the description under the video. So if you're listening to this right now, feel free to check the resources after you're done watching this. I also want to talk about leadership and how it uh, changed for you after you transitioned from the Marine Corps to the civilian side of things.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I mean, it's two completely different environments. So what was your experience there?
Yeah, on one hand, it's a great question, and I look back on my career, and so many of us, I think it's almost a universal challenge as we transition out of the service. And those of us who served longer, I think have it harder, but all of us have some level of challenge and transition. And you bring up leadership, and there are so many different elements of leadership and leading yourself, right? Leading your opportunities, and not to mention that typically most of us end up in spots and jobs where we're a leader or a manager in some form or another, formally or informally at the organizations that we're at. And there's a level of expectation coming out as a veteran that we are going to assume some leadership role, that we're going to bring some level of leadership. My experience is that there's a good side and a bad side to that. Depending on the organization that you go to, the expectation of your leadership may be negative. They have some generalized view of this hardcore Marine Corps colonel who's going to come in and act a particular way. And sometimes that's the case, and sometimes that's not. The good side is that they are going to expect you to lead, but that's where that lead yourself comes in, because you really have to. I had to check myself at the door and say, these folks aren't used to me. I need to understand that they probably have a stereotypical view of what they are going to expect of me. And I didn't give that enough credence in my first job out of the Marine Corps, where I thought I was being sensitive to those new needs and those things. But I wasn't looking at it from the lens of those on the receiving end. And there were some challenges there for me personally and for them as they looked at things differently. I needed to take a step where I looked at it and I took responsibility for the relationship and didn't say, well, it's on them to learn me. I needed to learn and understand them and modify how I approach things. The fundamental elements of my leadership were very sound. It was more in how I deliver that leadership, how I interact with other people, my expectations. I do think too that as a military member and then becoming a veteran, we have to be very careful that we're not contemptuous of those who haven't served in a way that negatively influences our ability to lead and manage those in our civilian community in our role. I didn't really feel that myself, but I do see that a lot. And that happens, right? I mean, we take pride that we're the less than 1% that served. We were willing to make a commitment that others weren't. But we shouldn't hold that against those who didn't make that commitment. We can't let that flavor how we interact or treat. Well, or we can, and we can fail in the civilian world. I mean, so I think that's really something that I really caution folks with. And from the lead yourself standpoint, I think folks need to understand that it is a transition. It's a challenge, and it's not easy. And if you don't pursue good mentors, and if you don't interact with folks who've been there and done it, and pursue some support from them, and give yourself some grace that you're going to have some challenges, try to figure it out yourself. It's a tough business to try to figure out yourself.
Yeah. And you also mentioned that stereotype about Marine Corps leadership and being hardcore, and maybe that's coming from the movies or the stories. Is that true, or would you want to debunk that stereo?
Well, I don't know. I don't know it's just from the movies. I mean, I think some of that is true, and there are cultural elements to this. There are, ethnic issues to this. There's sensitivities of the stereotype, but we feed that stereotype. As a Marine, any Marine, I can stand up in a group of other Marines and say, this is what we're going to do, and you're going to do it. And, no second guessing, because we're used to I've led in combat multiple tours. We didn't have the luxury of questioning orders and going into the depth of why. Now, a good leader is going to do that when they can, whether they're in uniform or not. But we had a way of interacting with each other that we all accepted as a norm. And I say I'm guessing more than the majority of the stereotype is true, And look at me. I'm a big, bald, aggressive, assertive person. So just the physical characteristics oftentimes of us also feed to that stereotype, but they're true. I mean, look at me, and if I'm not sensitive to how those around me who haven't necessarily ever been in that environment, that can be pretty intimidating. So I don't think it's as much stereotype as we got to be careful about just transplanting ourselves into a different world that has a different level of interaction and expectations.
Yeah, yeah, definitely makes sense. And you also mentioned mentorship a few times, and it seems like it played an important role in your personal development and your career. So what's your perspective on the benefits of mentorship?
Yeah, I mean, you have to take advantage of people's experience, and my experience, particularly in the veteran community, is we all want to share our lessons. We want to help the next person. I think there's a hesitancy among a lot of veterans to ask for help. If I can't figure it out myself, that's a sign of weakness. That everybody expects that I should have be able to figure it out myself, and that if I come and ask for help or seek interaction with and guidance, I'm showing some level of weakness or a lack of ability. And I'll correct you on one thing. I didn't do it well. I didn't seek out good mentors. I tried to figure it out myself and I struggled in doing that. And so for me, I've doubled down when somebody's getting out of the Marine Corps or any other service, or as they're transitioning or thinking about starting a business, anywhere where I can help, I'm like, let's get on a call. Let's talk. Let me help you. Let me at least give you some of my lessons. And if there's somebody that I served with, and they reach out to me, I've got all the time in the world for folks, particularly those that I've served with, because they're friends and I know them and I want to help them. But it goes beyond just friends and everything. And so what do I mean? I finally had a friend and a mentor say, Scott, you need to be more active. You need to get out there and network and interact with people and not see networking as a transactional endeavor where I'm asking you for something and you're giving me something. And, I think we also avoid networking because we think well, I don't want to ask people for something. Networking is about talking and learning about people and learning about interaction and what shared interests we have. And the transactions occur as a result of becoming familiar with one another. Hey, I just met Danny and Danny's got this need and we talked about this. And imagine that at 3 weeks later, I'm talking to somebody else and they have a need that Danny can fulfill. Hey, Danny, let me introduce you to somebody. I mean, that's how networking works. A mentor of mine says networking is always a bank shot. It's not a direct line. And I love that thought but we're hesitant to reach out, I think, a lot of times. And so I jumped into LinkedIn and started pushing against my internal hesitancies and just reaching out to people and say, hey, here's my situation. I'd love to hear about your lessons, the work that you're doing. And you know what? I've stayed connected with a good number of those folks. And most of it has never led to any business other than me being able to introduce them to people, them introduce to me to people. And it's strengthened the structure around us in a way that's really made sense. But anytime I can help, you've got to be willing to reach out and ask those around you for help and learn from them and not be embarrassed to admit, I don't know the answer to this. I need help.
Yeah. And for the people who maybe right now are in the process of transitioning from the military to the civilian world, you already shared a few very valuable pieces of advice. Maybe there is something else that you want to tell them as as a piece of advice, or maybe you want to reemphasize on something for the people who are transitioning.
Yeah, when I transitioned, and I see this so frequently with others, is there's an urgency to get the next job, a fear that I need to take care of my family. I need to pay my mortgage. I need to pay my car loans. I need to get my kids to college, whatever those pressures are. I need to support a family, whatever those are. And a large number of transitioning military members, and I hear this a lot when I mentor is, well, I'm just going to jump on a job so that I can get things figured out. My advice is take the time to figure it out and know who you are, where you think you want to go, maybe take a little more risk than you're comfortable with, and be willing to say no to the first opportunity that comes up. I jumped early. I jumped for a title, reputation, and I wasn't really understanding where I was headed. And I became very disenfranchised, uncomfortable, and unhappy very quickly. And that led to me then changing. And then it led to me changing again because I wasn't taking the time to think about my strengths, where I was good, how my strengths in the military that made me so successful as a Marine translated to what I thought would be good on the other side in the civilian sector. And if I had taken a little bit more time, interacted with some mentors, helped explore those areas, and then not been so worried to jump on the first thing that came in, I might have been happier. Flip side of it is I've got a lot of lessons learned from those experiences, and I might not be the person I am today if I hadn't had those rough experiences too, right? So you also got to be willing to learn from what you're going through at the time. But my biggest advice is be willing to say no to the first opportunity. The first opportunity might be the best one and the one that you find yourself completely happy and satisfied with. But I've got a sneaking suspicion that the chances are that the first opportunity isn't going to be the one that you're going to be happy with. So you really have to give some thought to that and interact with some people you trust who are going to shoot straight with you and not just tell you that to take it.
All right. And before we wrap up the episode, do you have some kind of advice for listeners in their early 20s? Or maybe if you imagine yourself when you were 20 years old, what kind of advice would you give to that person?
Uh, it takes time. A 20-year-old, what my biggest advice for me and everyone else, a year to a 20-year-old seems like a long time. Think long term. The things that are happening right now, the things you're trying to influence right now, good and bad in your perceptions, weigh heavily on you. And I would give everybody at that young age, think about the 5 and 10 year window. You're going to get to 25, you're going to get to 30. Think about where you want to be at those ages. Don't rush into things. When you do feel like things aren't going your way, give it a little bit of time because it'll probably turn around for you. As long as you're thinking beyond that next week, month, year, and try to keep that perspective when you're making life decisions, particularly.
All right. Well, thank you, Scott, for sharing your advice and stories and lessons. Good luck with what you do. Again, if you're listening to this, the links will be in the video's description. Go check them out. And again, thank you for joining and thank you for what you do.
Thank you. I appreciate being here. And thanks to everyone that's listening as well.